Back here again on my porch in South Minneapolis. This is a video I started making. The first half is called My First Hunting Trip. This will be the second half, my pal the gunslinger, Dillinger. But before, growing up in Minnesota, a lot of people hunt. It's a hunting type state. If you're from a different state, you might not realize what it's like to be in Minnesota, land of 10,000 lakes. By the way, let me go off on a tangent here. People say, our license plates say land of 10,000 lakes. And people will say, well, is that true? Does Minnesota really have 10,000 lakes? And not only is it true, but it's actually, we have a lot more than that. See, in Minnesota, there's like a legal definition of what a lake is, and a little stagnant pond is not considered a lake because lakefront property is treated differently. It's sometimes taxed higher, and there's all sorts of special rules that apply to lakes. So you have to have a legal definition of what a lake is. So a lake has to be a certain amount wide and a certain amount deep, and it has to have fresh water. It has to be fed from the underground water table or a spring that gives it fresh water. A stagnant pond of water that doesn't have fish in it, doesn't below the water table, that doesn't count. So there's a legal definition of what a lake is in Minnesota, and we actually have 14,000 in some lakes. Now, considering that you have 14,000 in some, they could have very well rounded it off and said land of 15,000 lakes. But Minnesota was settled primarily by Germans. That's the largest ethnic group, and secondarily by Scandinavians of various types, Swedes, Norwegians, Finns. So those were the original settlers of this state, and those people are all very stoic, and they don't like to brag. They don't like to be heard talking about themselves. If you have no idea about the Minnesota personality, you might want to watch the Coen brothers film Fargo or any of their films. Fargo kind of exaggerates some of the Minnesota accents, but it's essentially accurate. The Coen brothers are from Minnesota, and we're very proud of them. I love their movies personally. But they have a very Minnesota sense of humor. They do. And so if you love their movies, you would probably appreciate a Minnesota sense of humor. But so the stoic old Germans and Swedes and Norwegians who settled this, they don't like to brag about themselves. So when it came to coming up with the license plate slogan, instead of saying almost 15,000 or 15,000 or even saying 14,000, which is totally justified because we have more than 14,000, they said, well, let's just round it down to 10,000. So they literally rounded off 4,000 in some lakes. So do we have 10,000 lakes? No, we have 14,000 in some. And the reason why, if you're not from Minnesota, you'll find this interesting. The reason why we have so many lakes is the Ice Age. When these massive sheets of glacial ice were covering Canada, they covered like the northern part of America too. And these millions of tons of ice literally scraped huge divots out of the earth as they moved. And when the ice receded, those divots that were below the water table filled up and became lakes. And that's why Minnesota has 14,000 lakes, and Wisconsin has a lot of lakes. It's from the Ice Age. And I find that kind of fascinating because it's hard to picture something that big happening. But I have to watch the time here, and I'm getting off on tangents. Before I go on to some of my Dillinger gun stories about my pal, let me go back to hunting just briefly and say when I was a kid, I had this super traumatic experience because I don't know if you've ever seen a deer be cleaned. After when someone shot a deer, they have to clean it. Some people take it to a butcher, but people do it themselves. And the way you clean a deer is first you put newspapers all over the floor of your garage, if you have a garage. You need a garage really to clean a deer. Then you tie ropes to the deer's antlers and throw those ropes over the cross piece in the roof of your garage. You throw the ropes over, then you haul it up so it's hanging by the antlers, right? Then you take a big knife and you cut it right where it's going to make the trophy, and you cut it vertically down the middle of the belly, and you use ropes and you tie off like the upper legs so that it's sort of crucifixion style, so that the part you just slit open hangs open, and that makes it easy to clean all the guts and internal organs out. And then you start cutting the meat off. And there's a whole order in which you do that, which I'm not really familiar with. But my friend Steve, who lived right behind me, his family had a little bit of money. My family was the classic hidden poor of the suburbs, and as I mentioned in a previous video, it's a very low rent suburb, and nobody really had an attached garage or a paved driveway even. But my friend Steve, he lived right behind me, and his family was like the first family to get a garage in the entire neighborhood, and they also had one of the first to get a paved driveway, and they had so much money they actually paved it with cement, not asphalt. So they were doing well. But it wasn't an attached garage because they had bought the house without it. So the garage was set a little bit back from the house. So there was like this space between the house and the garage. And, I was over there playing practically every day. And like a year or two, and I was a little kid when they built that garage. And a year or two after they built that garage, I'm going over there in the summertime. I'm playing over there every day. And I'm probably, I don't know, 7 or 8 years old at this point, maybe even just 6, I don't know. But I'm going over there, gonna go find my friend and do some playing. And I came around the corner of that garage, and the door is usually open to the garage in the summertime, and quite often we played in the garage. If we weren't playing in the yard or in the basement of his house or my house, we played in the garage. So I come around the corner, the door is open, and I turn and look towards the garage to see if my friend's in there. And there's Steve's dad and another guy butchering out a deer, and they're most of the way done. So what I see is this deer's head, hanging from the rafters, with this huge, splayed out carcass with the front legs tied off in a crucifix position. All the internal organs are removed already. They've already started to remove pieces of the meat. They've got like hanging flaps of skin that does no longer have meat underneath them. And it was basically like a semi-skeleton with legs and a head, connected by the skin, which they'd left intact. And there was these two guys wearing big like butcher shop aprons, and they had newspapers all over the floor of the garage, and there was blood and gore everywhere. It was like a scene from the worst slasher movie, horror, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street. It was like a scene from the worst grade B gory horror movie you ever saw. Here I am like a 7-year-old kid. Turn the corner, I see that, and it was like, oh my God, what in God's name is going on here? Completely freaked me out. Now, fast forward to when I was in high school. There were a couple girls that used to be ringleaders in our group. And I'm not going to give their real names. I'm going to call them Sharon and Pet. Everybody that used to be in the group knows who I'm talking about. Sharon and Pet. Pet, P-E-T, Pet. That's the fake name I'm using for her. There was a time when I was going to go over to Pet's house. And it was after dark. And it wasn't super late, but she, for some reason, didn't want her parents to know that I was hanging with her. And we weren't actually going to do anything really that bad, I don't even think there was hanky-panky involved, at least nothing I would admit to or she would admit to, but, we were pals. And I was going to go over to her house, and she said, well, just come in through the garage door, because I don't want my parents to know that you're here. And she had a room that you could somehow get, you could go, they didn't live in my neighborhood, and they had an attached garage. And the house was kind of built on a hill, so the garage opened into the basement. There was a door opening into the basement from the garage. And so she said, I'll leave the garage door open, and I'll leave the connecting door to the basement open. So just come through that door and come in, and here's where my room is. So I, parked a few houses away, and I walk up, and I'm being stealthy and cool, and I go in through the garage. I open that door going into the basement, and there's the laundry room right there, and it's very dimly lit. And there's this huge, horned head thing hanging there. And same thing that happened to me when I was a kid. It wasn't gory, but they her dad had shot a deer, and I think he took it to a butcher shop to be cleaned, but he had I'm not sure if the butcher cut off the head or if he had cut off the head, but they were going to make the head into a trophy. And so he had the head, he had possession of the head. And I guess he had hung it up there in the laundry room because there was a floor drain underneath where he had hung it or something, but for whatever reason, I opened the door and there, like less than 10 feet in front of me, is this huge, enormous deer's head in the semi-darkness hanging there by the antlers. And again, it's like not something you expect to walk in on, and I almost freaked out, almost just startled. I'm not sure if I would have yelled or what, but fortunately Pat was coming up to meet me. I'm terrible at using fake names, but I'm not saying anything bad about her here. So she was coming up to meet me, and she said, "Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you that deer's head is there." And yeah, I think, yeah, that would have been nice to know actually, since I'm coming in this way. But so we just hung out and nothing bad happened, and we were perfect angels. And I just wanted to emphasize that fact. But okay, so this was supposed to be about Dillinger and guns, and here I've gone on all these tangents. But so Dillinger loved guns, and he always had a lot of guns from the time he was old enough to buy them. And he had a couple shotguns, and he had that .22 rifle that he had borrowed me before. And I remember when he bought his first, he had like a little target shooting like handgun, like a Ruger or something, a long barreled gun. And I remember though when he bought his Colt 45, he had a Colt Commander 45 with the blue steel version. You can get them like nickel plated. He had the blue steel version of the Colt 45, and he just loved that gun. I remember when he got it, I went over to his house, and he was showing it off to me. It was brand new, and he's like, he's like showing me how the clip comes out and where the safety is. He's just showing it off, showing me all the features of it, and he puts the clip in, and he had the clip out, and he pulled the trigger, and he showed me how it was, you know, when you finish shooting a clip in the Colt 45, it stays like in sort of this open position that you never see in the movies until you like pull it back and put a new fresh clip in it. So he showed me that this is the position that it goes to when you fired the last shot, and he showed me different things on the gun, and he puts the clip in, and he says, you know, and when you want to put a bullet in the chamber, you jack it like this. You know, he's showing me how you work the slide and jack a bullet into the chamber, and he pops the clip back out, and he's like talking to me, and I'm saying to him, and I said to him, "Wait a minute, didn't you jack a bullet into that chamber just now?" And by the way, before he showed it to me, of course, we had smoked a joint. It goes without saying. So he's showing it to me high, and I'm high, I'm looking at it, and he's showing me all these great features, and at some point I said, "Wait a minute, didn't you jack a bullet into that chamber right before you packed the clip out?" And he's like, "No, I jacked it when the clip goes out." And no sooner had he said that when the gun, and we're cranking the loud music too, we like rock and roll. No sooner had he said that than the gun goes off in his hand. He's sitting there, and it's like on his knee, pointed across the room, and it goes off right in his hand. It was a brand new gun. Little too much pressure. He had his finger on the trigger. He had the safety off. Like I told him, he had jacked a bullet into the chamber when the clip was in, and he hadn't jacked it back out. And so he had the clip out, but he had a bullet in the chamber. So he's sitting there with the gun on his knee, and it goes off. And we had the music so loud, and the 45 is not as loud as you might think. But we had the music very loud, and we both looked at each other, and I said, "Did that gun just go off?" And he's like, "Yeah, I think it did." And he said, "Oh my God, I think I shot my speaker." And he ran over to the speaker. And the reason he thought he had shot it is because everybody had big speakers back in the 70s. And he had the big woofers and everything, and the speaker kind of goes like this with the beat of the music, you know. Boom, 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 he kind of jerks. And he had, when it went off, his eye had been sort of unfocused, but looking across the room, and he saw his speaker jerk, and he thought he had shot it, but what he was just looking at was like the woofer or something, the speaker like vibrating with the beat of the music. So then I said, "Oh my God, where did that bullet go?" And we started looking, and we found a hole in the wall, and we ran around to the other side of the wall, and there was a hole in that wall, side of the wall. This is an old house that had like plaster walls, and so then we followed it across the room, and we found a hole in the next wall, and we ran around to the other side of that wall, and we found an exit hole in the other side of the wall. And he's using steel-jacketed slugs. These aren't dum-dums, so they don't spread. They stay intact until they hit something hard enough to stop them. Plaster walls don't stop a bullet from a Colt 45 worth of shit, is what we found out. So now we've gone through 2 interior walls, and we find the next hole, and it's right by the door. It's in the wall, a couple inches over from the door frame, the door that leads to the back alley. And we're both high, and we looked at each other, and we saw that bullet in the wall, that hole, and that's an outer wall. And we both thought the same thing, and we're both looking at each other like, oh my God, what if that bullet went into the alley and hit somebody? Now, there weren't ever hardly any people walking in the alley, but still, people are in the alley sometimes. You know, and fortunately, there weren't houses on the other side of the alley. There was a big brick warehouse on the other side of the alley, because it was right down near the corner. And the cross street was an industrial street that was zoned for that sort of thing. So there wasn't a house on the other side of the alley, and that's good. But we both looked at each other and said, oh my God, and opened the outside door, and really quick looked where the exit hole should be. And where the exit hole should be, the outer plaster or stucco or whatever you call it, it was something like that, it was like stucco, was cracked. It was cracked and it was bulged out a little bit. So there was just a little bulge in it, and there were cracks coming out from it. So we both, that outer wall stopped it, barely stopped it. After going through 2 interior walls, the outer wall did stop it, just barely. But that bullet almost got loose into the alley. And it would have probably been all right, because there was nobody in the alley. But it was a scary moment. So that's when he first bought the gun. That's the story of him setting it off by accident. Then he was kind of flush with a lot of money from his most successful crime at this point, which is a whole different story. But he had made a coup, which resulted in a large amount of money coming into his hands. And so he started buying things. And that gun, I think, was one of the things he bought. And he bought a few more handguns. He bought a little purse gun for his girlfriend, Magenta. And he bought 2 cars. And he had this fantastic, well, he actually bought the second car for his girlfriend, but they both had Mustangs. I can't remember what year his was. Hers was this fantastic 1965 Mustang coupe that, they repainted it back to the original color. It was sort of a green color. And he tried to talk his girlfriend into painting it a different color, and she was like, no, I want to repaint it back to the original color. But so these cars had both been repainted back to the original color, and they were like cherry cars. They were really sweet. Unfortunately, the neighborhood wasn't so great, and he put like nice stereos in the cars, because if you had a nice car in the 70s, you had to have a stereo that cranked up loud. Of course, your stereos in those days played like, cassette tapes. There was no CDs, so or you could play, or you could get an 8-track player, play 8 tracks, which was not great. But so they had these nice cars, and sure enough, their car got broke into a couple times. First time it happened, got the car stereo stolen. And second time it happened, I'm not sure if they got this car stereo stolen again, and the person was just looking for things, but the car got broken into a couple times. So what he did was he went out and bought a fancy alarm system for the car, which had a pager, which would actually be a silent alarm instead of the car alarm going off and whooping and screeching. He had a pager. So when he was parked at home, it was a silent alarm. So when someone messed with his car, this little pager box that he wore on his belt would say beep, 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 and a little light would flash. So one day he's sitting there watching TV, and beep, 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 gets a little beep. Someone's messing with your car. So he goes running grabs his Colt 45, runs to the back door, and throws the back door open, draws down on the guy with a fucking Colt 45 and says, "Freeze!" just like on the cop shows. So there's this tall, skinny black guy back there. He's got the thing in the window of the car trying to fish and get the door unlocked. And the guy literally does a step and fetch it where he turned completely white, or he may as well have. He metaphorically turned completely white. His eyes bulged out like basketballs, and he was just, this is going to sound horribly racist. Let me just say that I've been married to a black woman for 28 years. So if you're going to call me a racist for saying that, go ahead, because if you've been married to a black woman for 28 years and it doesn't make you into a racist, you will never be a racist. And it hasn't made me into a racist, and I have 2 wonderful mixed race kids. But so I'm not a racist, but this guy literally practically turned white and turned on his heel. Instead of freezing, he ran like the wind. I mean, like the silver streak. He ran out of there. And when Tom saw he was running, there was an alley on the other, and on the other side of the alley was a warehouse made out of brick. I mean, it was solid. It was like cinder blocks or something. So, and there was nobody in it at night. So there was nobody in it, you know, but you couldn't have shot a bullet through the wall of that warehouse. It was too strong. It wasn't like the interior walls of his house. So when he saw the guy was running, he aimed the gun like a couple feet above where the guy's head was and fired, and he was a great shot, and just fired off one. And he said the guy was already running fast, but when he heard the gun fire, his speed literally doubled in mid-stride. He said it was amazing. And Tom ran down to the end of his yard, which is a very short yard in that part of South Minneapolis, ran down to the end of his yard to see where the guy was going. And by the time he ran from the back step to the end of his yard, that guy was already at the end of the block. And this was like the full length of the block. He was running that fast because Tom Dillinger was all the way down at the other end. So he was already at the other end of the block. So nothing motivates you to run faster than thinking someone's going to shoot your ass any second. Well, let me see if I could. So that was the one time he shot at somebody. And then there was another time when he was at First Avenue when somebody was giving him crap out on the sidewalk right in front of First Avenue and trying to start a fight with him. And that he did draw down on this guy in front of First Avenue once. Didn't fire a shot. But that's the only time he ever drew down on anybody. Those were the only 2 times he ever drew that gun and pointed it at anybody. Because he was, at heart, a really not a violent person. He was just a person that didn't like to take crap from people. But he was not a violent person, would never have started trouble. And it totally unlike him to like rob somebody with a gun or something like that. I just want to put that out there. He was a sweet guy, and I loved him a lot, you know, and I still miss him. Let me take a drink. That's good water. Okay, there's my 5-minute warning. I don't want this video to split. Let me try and squeeze in this one more story because I think it's a great story about Tom and his guns. So when they were still flush with money, they took a bunch of trips to Jamaica and other places, and I'll have to put some of those stories on a different, I heard some great stories secondhand from Jamaica, and I'll relay some of those on a different tape. But him and his girlfriend took a lot of vacations during that time because they were very flush with money from this large coup that he had had. And he still had a job, but he literally had earned so much cash money on the side at this point that at one point he had 3 or 4 uncashed paychecks, and he was only paid every other week, just gathering dust in a drawer. And I said to him, "You've got to cash your paychecks. That's very suspicious if they find out you're not cashing your paychecks. You've got to put those in the bank. You can't just let them pile up." And he's like, yeah, you're right, I do. But, so anyways, one time I went over there, just gonna hang and party and smoke dope with my friends, you know. I went over there this one time, and there was this blonde kid from Iowa in there, and we were like in our 20s, and he was a couple years younger than us. He was barely into his 20s, he was maybe 21 or 22. And he was all banged up. I mean, he was all bruised up. He had like a bruise on his head and like a black eye, and his arm was all hurt, you know. He was like being real ginger about it. He had some road burns on him. I can't even remember exactly where they were. But so, and he was staying there with my friend Dillinger and his girlfriend. They were letting him use a bedroom. It was like a 3-bedroom house, and of course they slept in the same bedroom. So they had made room for him, and I don't think he had actually used a bedroom. I think he was sleeping on the couch. But this guy, who we didn't know, was staying there. And so I just came over there one night and met him. And he had just moved in like the day or the night before. And what had happened, and this will tell you what a nice guy Dillinger was at heart, is what had happened is that he had been downtown with his girlfriend and saw this guy on a motorcycle just weaving, just very drunk, and saw the guy looked like he couldn't handle the motorcycle in his condition, just wobbling, and they noticed he was wobbling before anything happened. And then the guy went down, just laid it down hard, you know, and because he probably going 20 miles an hour at least, even though he was on a city street at 20 or 30 miles an hour, laid it down hard and got banged up and was clearly hurt. And Dillinger went over there full of sympathy and said, "Hey man, are you all right?" And he wasn't all right. And what Dillinger knew, that if he waited for the cops to show up, that they would see he was drunk, see he was driving drunk, impound his motorcycle, and probably arrest him. And this guy, so just on the spur of the moment, out of the generosity of his heart, you know, Dillinger stood up his motorcycle and rolled it over. It wasn't really damaged, and rolled it over to a valid parking spot, you know, and put the kickstand down and left it there on a parking spot, and put the guy into his car and brought him home. And they got to talking to him. They were going to try and hook him up with whoever his people were. Well, it turns out he had no people. He had moved up here from Iowa. You know, he'd never been out of home for any length of time, and he had moved up here from Iowa, and really didn't have any people up here, and he really was not handling being on his own well, you know. And Dillinger says to the guy, "Well, you can stay here for a while until you figure out something else." So they were just putting him up for a week or two until he figured out something else. Well, you know, it takes an enormous spirit of human kindness and generosity to do something like that. So I got to wrap this up in like the next 2 minutes. So to make a long story short, they had already planned a vacation to Florida for a week or two later, and the guy was still in their house. And by this time we were all very chummy, and they were very good friends with the guy. So they were fine leaving this guy in their house, literally when they were going to be in Florida for a week. Very trusting thing to do. But Tom did have a safe that he locked up his valuables in that was bolted to the floor. It was a heavy-duty safe. So, unfortunately, Tom had this bad habit of every now and then going out and taking a shot at this light bulb. I mentioned the warehouse behind his house. I'm going to turn off my timer. Actually, I'm going to reset it for 2 minutes because I need to wrap this up in 2 more minutes. Okay. There was this warehouse behind his house. I mentioned that several times already. And it was like a good 4 stories. Maybe it was 5 stories. And way up in the corner was a light bulb at the very corner of the top. I have no idea how they changed it. They must have gone up on the roof and reached over to change it. But it was on the corner on the alley side, way up there. There was just a light bulb sticking out of there, a little tiny fixture, just a naked light bulb sticking out there for no reason. And every now and then when we were getting wasted, Tom would take that .22 rifle and he would go out on his back porch and he would try to shoot that light bulb. And he would take 1 or 2 shots, and then he would run back inside. And he could never hit it, because it was a really hard shot. And we're talking like a 4-story building, you know, and he's on the back porch. It's like more than 100 yards. And it's you know, the target is the size of a light bulb, you know. So it's a very hard shot, and he was a good shot. But he had always wanted to shoot out that light bulb for whatever crazy reason. So he would take a few shots at it now and then. And the police never came because he'd take 1 or 2 shots and disappear back into his house. So the gunshot might have been reported, but nobody ever knew where it came from. And you couldn't hit anybody that way because the bullet was going straight up towards the stars, or else it would hit the brickwork on the corner of the warehouse. It's a .22 shot. It's not going to ricochet off there and kill anybody. It's not at that angle, not where it was going. But so, unfortunately, he had done this showing off for his new friend from Iowa. So I think you can see where I'm going. They went down to Florida, and while they were gone, their new friend got drunk on beer. He doesn't make good decisions while drunk. That's the condition they found him in, so why be surprised? Got drunk on beer and decided, I'm going to borrow my new friend's rifle, and I'm going to be the one to shoot out that light bulb, right? So this tape might even split. I think I'm right up on the edge. But he goes out to the back porch and he takes a couple shots at it. And of course he misses it. He wasn't nearly as good a shot as Dillinger was. So he goes back in, drinks some more, goes back out there, takes a couple more shots at it. Goes back in, drinks some more, goes back out, takes a couple more shots. Goes back in, drinks some more. About the fourth time he comes out, he hears this, "Put the gun down." The entire backyard is surrounded by Minneapolis police, and they're all pointing guns at him. So they're like on the megaphone, on the bullhorn. "Put the gun down. Put your hands up and turn." You know, he's under arrest, right? So the police come in, search the entire house. Of course, whatever weed and money that Tom had was in his safe, which they could not open. You'd have to blast it open. This was like a $600 safe that was bolted to the floor in the closet of the bedroom, and they didn't have a search warrant anyways. But they came in because they arrested him. They shook down the house, and my friend Dillinger had to come back from Florida on his vacation, come back early to bail the guy out. And he had to hassle with the police for weeks to get his guns back, even after they found out that none of those guns belonged to the person they had arrested. Had to hassle with them for weeks, but eventually they gave it all back. But he showed me the list of stuff. They have to list it when they put it in the police property room, and they gave him an inventory list of everything they took. And it was all guns and ammo. He always had lots of extra ammo around. And, you know, the 2 shotguns, the .22 rifle, you know, he had some other old junk rifle. He had the Ruger, the .45, his girlfriend's purse gun. He had some other little pistol. I mean, I can't remember everything he had, but he liked guns. He had a lot of guns. He had a lot of ammo. At the bottom of the list of the stuff the police confiscated, it said 2 large wicker laundry baskets. They had confiscated 2 large wicker laundry baskets, and he pointed it out to me. And I said, "Why the fuck did they confiscate 2 large wicker laundry baskets?" And he said, "That's what they used to carry all the guns and ammo in when they confiscated the guns. They were like, how are we going to carry this?" So they confiscated his laundry baskets. They needed 2 laundry baskets to carry all the guns and ammo out of that house. So that's what they took, all the guns plus his laundry baskets. That's the end of this story. I don't want this tape to divide, so I'm going to shut it off right there.